I have done nothing wrong, ever, in my life.
I know this, and I love you.
Greetings, fellow mortals. Just a reminder, saying it's just my opinion is for cowards. If I had a nickel for the number of Amazon Prime shows where they were held on the back of the evil Superman trope, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that there's 2 of them going at basically the exact same time. Not to compare Homelander with Omni-Man too much, of course. I mean, Omni-Man is his own character, and Homelander at this point is basically a political parody. You can deny it all you want, but it's obvious. You can see what they're doing. And also, I'm not going to lie, Omni-Man's sneeze would accidentally kill Homelander. But they're both my favorite characters by far from their respective series. Not because they're perfect or good people, but because they're the most interesting. They're the most fun to watch out of any other character in their respective franchise.
Well, hang on, you've just...
No, I like it. This is brilliant, but I like this.
But this is not a video about Homelander. This is a video about Omni-Man, who is by far my favorite part of the Invincible franchise, because his story, character, relationships, and even performance is my favorite. I'm not a fan of them spending so much of their very large budget on celebrity actors when the animation team is dying of starvation and haven't seen their family in 5 years. Seriously, you need to give them something to work with, Amazon, at this point besides paper clips and bubblegum, and you need to hire more people so they can go home and see their families, especially if you want to keep this series coming out year after year. But I do have to say, J.K. Simmons as Omni-Man was perfect casting. That was the right call to pay that man 10 out of 10 decision. He pointed out of the park with his bat, hit the home run, and then started moonwalking across the bases. It was that good of a performance.
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
The first time I heard his voice as Omni-Man, I knew that it was it, that it was perfect, that you couldn't get better than that, and his voice gets every single emotion down perfectly. Almost all of my favorite quotes from Invincible are from Omni-Man to begin with, but Simmons brought them to life. This isn't to say that the others aren't doing a great job. The professional voice actors who do voice multiple different characters are amazing, and most of the celebrities are good to tolerable, if not what I imagined from the comics, and that's admittedly a matter of personal taste. I can't defend it if you say that I'm wrong, but this is perfect casting for Omni-Man. He is the one character who, when I go back to read the comic books, I hear J.K. Simmons' voice every time, and that is such a good sign of an amazing cast decision.
No notes?
No notes.
No notes!
No notes.
No notes!
No notes. It's perfect.
And then there is the story. Omni-Man is the single best version of the evil Superman trope, and I like Homelander, I do, but let's face it, like I said earlier, he's just the embodiment of Donald Trump at this point. Can we agree on that fact? And I'm so sick about hearing real world politics in my everyday life. I'm gonna be honest, I just prefer the story about the Saiyan Kryptonians coming to conquer Earth. I like the distraction. And for the most part, the Superman turning evil trope was played out after the original Justice League cartoon did the Justice Lords. That was well done, and everything afterwards was not nearly as good, unless you count the Crime Syndicate, but that's completely different with just an alternate reality altogether. And to be fair, Superman just turning evil doesn't make sense to begin with, especially with a single death causing it. Especially Injustice. Just an excuse for a fighting game. A fun excuse, but let's not act like the writing is Shakespearean or anything.
I'm just saying.
I think what makes Omni-Man so unique is that he's not purely evil. He's not sociopathic. He does in fact do evil things, especially at the beginning, but he's more of a depressed Superman trope who has been indoctrinated by a fascist empire who view themselves as better than everyone else, and all other species need to be under their thumb or just perish outright. And let's start with the first part of that description. I actually have a love in my heart at the idea of overpowered characters being sad, lonely, and unfulfilled. Saitama from One Punch Man became so strong through his training that literally nothing is a challenge to him anymore. Things that are bigger than skyscrapers or can kick him to the moon or even warp reality is just boring to him, despite his previous love of fighting as a superhero. Phenomenon from Dispatch struggles to fit in with the populace of Earth and feels extremely alone, despite in fact loving the process of helping people. Not to mention that he appears to be an outcast from his home planet, which is really sad because he's a nice guy. Metro Man from Megamind lost the sense of meaning he had from being a superhero and just decides to quit and let the supervillain win. Think of Omni-Man as them if they were raised by the bad guys and made terrible decisions and killed a bunch of people.
Oh, I made myself sad.
Because the Viltrumite Empire is in fact monstrous, completely a mix of what if Kryptonians were actually like the Saiyans, but instead of being under Frieza's thumb, they just do it because they're expanding their empire, enslaving the other races, stealing resources, and procreating because of a population crisis. Sometimes not even consensually. Yep, still can't believe that Robert Kirkman did this, but alright, you do you, man. I'm still wondering if this part will be adapted at all. They've already removed a lot of the more controversial material from the show, which is weird because they left in the blood, the gore, and the cursing, but take out domestic abuse storylines, you know, the ones that point out that domestic abuse is bad. Why did you take out the stories which point out that domestic abuse is bad? I can understand Anis's stuff inevitably being cut because the continuation and payoff from Kirkman with that storyline was horrendous, but Amber literally had her entire storyline cut, which actually did have a nice conclusion. I'm just saying, it is very odd of him.
That was weird.
This is especially true because the entire Viltrumite Empire is abuse. Kids are raised to be brutal, unforgiving warriors. Their every waking moment is dedicated to it, and watching flashes from their society is utterly fascinating, especially when it came to Omni-Man, because he came from that. That was his life. Any outside thought was immediately crushed, and he was forced into terrible situations to reinforce what the Empire wanted him to believe. And that happened over and over and over again for what, like 2,000 years? He was literally born and raised to conquer, to be a soldier, to be a cog in the Empire machine. It's only after learning more about him that makes going back to season 1 and watching his previous reactions to Earthlings that make everything so much more memorable. It all makes sense because now you understand him on a more fundamental level. You can see things through his eyes. They are distorted and wrong, but you understand him more now. Originally sent to Earth to weaken them for invasion and to procreate, Nolan took up the persona of Omni-Man to embed himself into the world as a spy, as a turncoat. Instead of using brute force, he instead went with the sweeter route of using honey rather than vinegar. And his acting was good. So good, in fact, that he actually fell for it himself. Nolan actually fell into the trap of his family life, becoming more fond of the people in his life than he ever meant to, because Earth had kindness and compassion and hope that the Viltrumite Empire never did. He actually enjoyed LARPing as a hero and a family man, so much so that when he was reminded that this isn't who he actually is, it was like a shock to the system.
I've made a huge mistake.
And it's this aspect of him that makes him the most interesting character to me, even more than Mark, Cecil, or Eve. It is this retrospective look at him conflicting with his own indoctrination and the affection he feels for the people of Earth, or at least his family, that makes him so great, so entertaining, so fun to watch. It was a great foreshadow that Viltrumites are just suckers for Earth culture. Even some of the worst Viltrumites get pulled into it. They become enamored with Earth and its culture. I've even seen a lot of work online from fans about how this could happen to Conquest. I don't know exactly how that's true, but this is a series with a lot of what ifs and multiverses, so you know what? I'll go with it. And it's hilarious that this happens because it mimics real world circumstances where people manage to escape dictatorships and instantly found happiness in a freer country, only for it to be ruined by their brat kids being completely entitled and soft because they don't know what they could have faced if their parents didn't leave. And this is a joke about Mark. Don't hate the video. It's a joke. No.
No. Wait.
Now, Nolan was not the most involved father in the world. It is outright stated in the series that he was very busy as Omni-Man and with his writing job, but there is no doubt that he treated Kid Mark better than any Viltrumite ever treated him. Nolan at the very least set a good example to Mark, if only because he needed to keep the secret of why he was actually at Earth, a secret. And it all just came crashing down when Mark gained powers and ruined the LARP, that little twerp. Once again, it's a joke, just go with it. Honestly, it felt as though Nolan just decided to live out this specific lifetime with his happy family until they died of old age. After all, a century at the absolute max for Mark is nothing to Omni-Man. Then he could just start again and do things the Viltrumite way. But Mark gaining powers in the middle of this and training caused those old memories to flash before his eyes, reminding him of who he actually is and why he is actually on Earth.
Hands. Are we the baddies?
And that kicks off everything with him killing the Guardians in the scene that made me continue watching the show and get into the comics later, because it still might be the single best scene in the entire show, or at least top 5. And after truly understanding Viltrumite culture and Omni-Man's past, seeing his disgust at the new team of replacements for the Guardians and how he acted about the inevitable downfall of Earth is fascinating. The conflict he must have experienced with his programming from his old home and the affection he felt for his new home must have been awful until there was no getting around it anymore, when the only choice was to dominate, because there was no going back after what he did with the Guardians.
People don't forget. Nothing gets forgiven.
That's true.
And of course, there's no going back after everything that happened in season 1, especially the finale. Even while understanding his internal conflict, you can't condone Nolan. He did in fact know better at that point. He understood that there was a better way. The correct course of action would have been to confess to Cecil after Mark got his powers. That way they could work together to find a solution. They could even properly delay the Viltrumites by Nolan giving false reports, which are backed up by Cecil. In fact, this sounds like a fascinating what-if scenario. I'm just saying, Invincible as a show is going to end eventually, even if they're pushing that out as much as possible. An alternate timeline with different events sounds like a good mini-series to me, especially if they show branching consequences, like Mark dying because Nolan chose Earth. That would be very interesting. I mean, it is a fanfiction concept, but at least Invincible got a relatively faithful animated adaptation, unlike Scott Pilgrim.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
But he didn't do the right thing from the start. He decided to fall back into who he used to be, into who he was trained to be instead of who he chose to be, and that damned him. Nolan lost everything. While you can understand him succumbing to hundreds upon hundreds of years of indoctrination, that doesn't make what he did right in any conceivable way. It doesn't bring back all the people who died. I'm not saying that Omni-Man is ever going to get a completely clean slate. Being the most interesting or the best written character in a series doesn't mean they have to be completely good or even redeemable in any conceivable way. It just means that they have to have the most interesting backstory, storyline, and personality. What Omni-Man did was horrible, and he earned the absolute suffering he felt afterwards.
Failure! You're still a failure!
And boy, did he suffer. The immediate aftermath is pure misery and depression, and even the bit of happiness in a new life that he found afterwards was short-lived. And along the way, his time with Andressa basically symbolizes the ultimate futility of running away and not facing your problems. It was never going to last forever or even all that long. It led to something great with his second son, Oliver, but it was eventually time for him to face the music. He couldn't delay that forever. He would have to decide whether or not to side with Earth or to return to his Viltrumite empire. And we all know that his love for Mark always won out in the end.
Don't give me hope.
If there was ever a moment that Nolan was going to break, to absolutely shatter and become who he used to be, it would have been when he was captured and taken back into the custody of the Viltrumites. People fall back into old habits and mindsets really quickly, even if they break free of those chains before. From religion to governments to cults to even internet forums, I am looking at you, Reddit, and years of being involved in anything at all leaves a lasting impression. The longer you're involved with something or someone, the harder it is to break mindsets or habits, even if you know that something is objectively wrong, because it's literally been forced, manipulated, and beaten into your thick skull.
So, back to it. No exceptions.
20 years on Earth is basically nothing to Nolan. Generally, in the comics at least, this guy is over 2,000 years old. That is literally just 1/100th of his life. This would be like if you're 30 and then spent 3 months somewhere significantly nicer than where you're from and then completely changed everything about yourself. Then you go back to your old life and have everything that you learned and your growth just beaten out of you. The mental trauma comes flooding back. You are forced to become who you used to be. Most people would break. In fact, if you look at the vast history of humanity, almost everyone breaks, but Omni-Man didn't.
You're horrible.
You're an irredeemable monster! Oh, what took you so long, idiot?
Instead, he overcame. He endured being captured and beaten, realizing what his new priorities actually are. He decided that he could no longer side with his original home or justify his previous atrocities, which there were a lot of them. The only course of action left for him was to fight back. He decided to become an antagonist to his old people instead of a villain to Earth, because everyone is the antagonist of someone else's story. All the while, Omni-Man really didn't believe for a solitary second that he would survive or even succeed in any conceivable way. And in all honesty, the Viltrumites probably would have won through raw casualties alone if they actually wanted to slaughter all of humanity, because they did actually want most of the Earthlings alive so that they could reproduce with the humans. And what does Omni-Man receive when he returns to Earth as a conquering hero after finally coming to terms with the fact that the Viltrumite way of life was wrong and that he's going to protect his new home until his dying breath, which is probably going to happen sooner rather than later in his own mind? You know what he got? A whole lot of hate, distrust, and fear, all of which was perfectly reasonable, expected, and understandable. This guy slaughtered hundreds upon hundreds with ease and denounced everything about Earth, calling us animals that are beneath them. Can you imagine being on the opposite end of Nolan's return, being his wife, his friend, his colleague, or even just a random bystander, knowing that he's not going to face a second of imprisonment, let alone a legitimate trial for his crimes, because the world needs him to defend against the incoming threats?
Well, this sucks.
It is completely understandable that all other official heroes would give Omni-Man side-eye looks. It makes sense that the government and media wouldn't trust him. It is absolutely reasonable that normal human beings would be terrified of a guy who is fast and strong enough to kill them with a pinky finger before they even realize that he's moving. He would just stab them through the eye with a pinky finger and then flick it, and then your brain would explode. Can you even imagine being the family of the victims of the people that he did kill and knowing that you're not going to get any sort of justice from that? And also, it's right that Debbie tore him a new one, because that was 20 years of lies, 20 years of tricks, 20 years of not revealing your true self or your true intentions, all revealed in the moment where Debbie had to watch him slaughter innocents, beat her son almost to death, and hear her husband openly proclaim that she is like a dog to him, which is really weird. It is a weird thing to say about someone that you've slept with.
Oh, I see nothing. I was not here. I did not even get up this morning.
Of course, we know that comment was just him coping. He does actually love Debbie. He does care about Earth. He does want to make things right. Omni-Man's entire arc is that of redemption, which is pretty simple. A deeply flawed character who has made many mistakes realizes the errors of their ways and works to make things right by becoming better versions of themselves morally and atoning for their sins. And this works to varying degrees based off of what the character has done. After all, it's easier to atone from being a liar, a cheat, or a thief compared to a mass murderer. You can reveal the truth. You can own up to your deceit. You can give back what you've taken, or at least pay for it with money. But that's the hard part, is as sins become more intense, it's not as likely you're ever going to be able to make up for it. And you can't make up for the absurd mental trauma created by your rampage, or the lives lost by you trying to conquer Earth. There's not really any going back from that.
Well, that's the end of me.
Getting someone to trust you after you lied to them, after you stolen from them, after you cheated on them is hard enough. Oddly enough, I still see people treating Rex as the worst, most irredeemable hero because he cheated on Eve and treated Monster Girl badly, and he is in fact an asshole. But would you really compare him to the people who hurt and slaughter innocents? There are levels to this. These two characters are in entirely different ballparks when it comes to sins, and in a way, Omni-Man was Rex in all the worst ways. He had all of Rex's worst qualities. He had another kid outside of his marriage with Debbie. He looked down on Earthlings. He, and I need to emphasize this, killed innocent people.
Perhaps I treated you too harshly.
That's the difficult part about the redemption arc. Can this character come back from this? Can they be better? Can you, as a member of the audience, forgive them? Can the people who were wronged by the character forgive them? And the answers are always different for the story involved. Zuko didn't kill anyone, but he tried, and he betrayed all of the main characters, requiring almost half a full season for everyone to trust him again. Saul Goodman couldn't make up for helping Walter White and, his various other crimes and sins. He couldn't even save his old relationships by the end of his series. His only real choices were to own up and pay for what he's done, or to sneak away from the consequences of his actions. Kratos will never escape the reality that he led to the destruction of an entire country full of people because he had to kill his own father. And he eventually proved that he wasn't that person anymore time and time again, but it still doesn't change what he's done, who he used to be. He has to live with that, and he has to accept that some people will hold that against him forever.
First, let's get one thing straight. I'm not crying. I'm just sweating through my eyes.
And that's what Omni-Man is doing in Invincible Season 4 and in the equivalent in the comics. He is proving that he is a changed man, that he wanted to be the Omni-Man that everyone believed him to be, that he will defend Earth from the Viltrumites, and slowly but surely he does so. Now, Season 4 is probably the worst part of the show by far. It has the worst episode, the worst pacing, and the worst animation. But Omni-Man's arc is still good, just top notch. Mwah, love it. He's undergoing the redemption part of his redemption arc. He's not the same person at the start of the story, which is the entire point, the character development section of the writing. People might not forgive him. In fact, the families of his victims most definitely won't, but that's not stopping him from doing his best, because the world needs him to do this, and he needs to be better, and he needs to step up and answer the call to action. And that's what makes a hero's journey.
Oh, it's so
obvious. I would have never thought of that.
In fact, if you think about it, Omni-Man kind of goes through a reverse hero's journey in the fact that he resisted the call to adventure at the beginning, which was, his purpose of destroying the Earth, and he did this as long as possible until his hand was forced. And then afterwards, he had to leave, go through the lowest of lows, and then come back forever changed. Well, Mark most definitely is the main character and the protagonist. Omni-Man fitting into this bizarro version of the hero's journey is part of the reason that I find him to be the most compelling character. He fits the established order of storytelling, but in the most unique way possible. It is a deconstruction just as much as it is playing the tropes completely straight. It's fascinating to see play out and for him to end up the person he always pretended to be before Mark developed his powers. And it's hard to say if the show will nail this part completely. Many different segments and characters have been changed from the comics. I could see them changing his shifting relationship with Debbie and maybe even his ultimate outcome. I don't know, Robert Kirkman is a weird guy, trying not to be called out for being weird, but there's no pleasing the internet, so you never know. Or Hollywood, really, if you think about it. I believe at some point, show exclusive fans are actually going to read at least part of the comic books and then freak out. They will also realize how much better the art is, because those poor animators have been beaten down more than Omni-Man imprisoned on his home planet. I am serious. They need to be given a break, they need to be given more money, and they need to be given more people to work with.
Help me! Help me! Help me!
It is through this combination of performance, of backstory, of shifting relationships, and of character development that makes Omni-Man my favorite character in the series. Instead of just being an evil Superman, they took the idea, this concept, and deconstructed it into something else. Robert Kirkman took all of these different elements from Saiyans, from Kryptonians, from evil Superman, and combined it all into one, into something new and amazing. If you break down this character to the most fundamental level, to the outline, we're following a man falling back into old habits, becoming who he used to be after a gigantic shift in his life. He's made mistakes, and now he's trying to atone for them after realizing the errors of his ways, and realizing that he needs to be better and that he can be better. If you break down his most basic outline, that is Omni-Man. He has done evil deeds, but he's not corrupt to his core. Of course, his hands are stained with blood, there's no washing that off, but he can try to make up for it by preventing more harm from coming to the people around him, because that's all he can do. The only other option is to just give up and die.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
Can he make up for what he's done? Can he atone? Can he become a better version of himself and stay that way? Has he truly changed enough internally? Can he mend his relationships? That's hard to tell even for the best of redemption arcs. Usually the answer is a no until the final moments. Usually where the character undergoing their redemption arc perishes for the sake of others. Usually when the trope of the ultimate sacrifice is done, it's to prove that the character has in fact completely changed. They don't value themselves or their previous ideas more than others anymore. There's no greater love than dying for someone else. It could also be done because the character no longer wants to live with themselves and what they've done, or maybe it's the "if I'm going down, I'm taking you down with me" trope.
That's not funny. That's not...
No spoilers for what comes after season 4, of course. In fact, I'm not entirely certain that the show won't change more and more developments from the comics as time goes on. How Omni-Man's relationships shift and his ultimate fate could be altered. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if many things are altered for the sake of Kirkman being embarrassed about his previous edgy storylines. Seriously speaking though, one of the best things to come out of the Invincible show was the fact that it got me into the comics to begin with. Very few things are done better in the animated series compared to the comics. Literally, the one thing that I can think of are the expanded aspects of Omni-Man's character, past, feelings, relationships, and motivations. He's the best part of both versions by far. I absolutely adore his character and his arc. The only thing that I could really compare it to would be the little special that Eve got, which expanded her character and had great animation. I really wish we had more of that instead of whatever we got in season 4.
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
But what do you think? Is Omni-Man your favorite character? Who is your favorite character? What aspect of their development sticks with you the most? Please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, along with any complaints you have about the animation quality of Season 4. I'd love to hear them all. And remember, if you disagree with everything I have to say, that is perfectly fine. After all, everyone is entitled to their objectively wrong opinion.
My work here is done.
Thank you all so much for watching.
You're still here?
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. You bye. Boom.
Do not despair.